I finally bought my dream house and invited my family to see it. No one showed up. Then my dad texted, "We need to talk about the house." At 8:47 on a Saturday night, I stood alone in a dining room I'd spent 10 years dreaming about, staring at a table set for 5, a roast chicken going cold, and silver balloons spelling home that were already starting to sag. And I realized I wasn't sad. I was done. That's different. Sadness wants resolution. Done is a door closing, a lock turning. A sound so quiet you almost miss it, except it changes everything that comes after. My family was supposed to be there an hour and 47 minutes ago. My mother's text, the only communication I'd received, sat on my phone like a slap. "Sorry, something came up. Busy tonight." 5 words. No call, no explanation, no congratulations on the biggest achievement of your life. 5 words for 10 years of work. I put my phone face down on the counter. Then I picked up the lemon tart I'd spent 3 hours making from scratch. My grandmother's recipe, the one I'd learned at 13, the one I'd thought might make my mother smile, and I dropped it into the trash. The thud it made was the most honest sound I'd heard all night. My name is Madison Carter. I turned 30 the March before I bought that house, and I'd spent nearly my entire 20s building toward one single, specific, almost embarrassingly concrete goal: owning a robin's egg blue house with a white fence and an oak tree in the front yard. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I've heard every version of it. That's not a financial plan, that's a Pinterest board. You're 30 and you've never been to Europe? Live a little, Maddie. That last one was my brother Kevin's favorite. Kevin, who was 33, who'd never had a savings account that lasted longer than a season, who cycled through apartments the way other people cycled through Netflix shows. Kevin, who once told me at Thanksgiving, in front of our parents, our aunt, our cousin, that I treated money like a religion and fun like a sin. Everyone laughed. I smiled. I went home that night and transferred another $200 into my house fund. Here's what they never saw: the $38,000 I'd saved by age 25 while working help desk at an IT firm in Raleigh, a city where I knew exactly no one. The $16 an hour starting wage that I'd clawed up to $31 by switching companies twice, getting 2 certifications, CompTIA Security Plus and AWS Solutions Architect, and saying yes to every overnight shift nobody else wanted. The studio apartment I lived in for 4 years that was so small I could touch both walls if I stood in the middle and stretched out my arms. The used 2014 Honda Civic I drove until the odometer read 187,000 miles. The meal prep Sundays, the library books instead of streaming subscriptions, the discipline that looked from the outside like deprivation. It wasn't deprivation, it was architecture. I was building something. And on March 22nd at 2:15 p.m., sitting in a title company conference room in Asheville, North Carolina, I signed my name 43 times, handed over a cashier's check for $47,600, my down payment, no co-signers, no family money, not a single dollar I hadn't earned, and the attorney, a woman named Diane Prescott, slid a single brass key across the table and said, "Congratulations, Ms. Carter, it's yours." I held that key in my palm, and I felt the weight of a decade lift off my chest. The house was $289,000, a 3-bedroom craftsman bungalow on Laurel Ridge Drive with robin's egg blue siding, a white picket fence, hardwood floors, a wraparound porch with a swing, and, I swear this is true, a 70-year-old oak tree in the front yard that looked exactly like the one I'd drawn in colored pencil when I was 9 years old. I still have that drawing. It's in a frame now, hanging in the hallway. The first thing I wanted to do was share it, not on social media, not with coworkers, with my family. I know how that sounds given what happened, but you have to understand, the wanting wasn't rational, it wasn't strategic. It was the same instinct that makes a kid run inside after catching a firefly. Look what I found. Are you watching? I'd been running inside my whole life with my hands cupped around something glowing, and every time my family would glance up, shrug, and go back to whatever they were doing. But this time would be different. That's what I told myself. This time the thing in my hands was too big to ignore. So I sent a message to the family group chat, me, my parents Sharon and George, and Kevin. I typed it carefully. I included a photo of me standing on the porch, holding the key, smiling so hard my face hurt. "Hey everyone! I officially closed on the house today. I'm hosting dinner this Saturday at 7 to celebrate. I'd love for you all to be there. Address below. It would mean the world to me." My mother replied, "Oh wow, okay." Kevin sent a thumbs up emoji. My father didn't respond at all. I told myself that was fine, that they'd come, that showing up was what mattered, not the texting. Saturday arrived. I cooked all day. Roast chicken with thyme and lemon, my father's favorite, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds, homemade rolls, the lemon tart. I set the dining table with plates I'd bought specifically for this night. White ceramic, nothing fancy, but new, clean, mine. I bought flowers, yellow tulips, and put them in a glass pitcher because I didn't own a vase yet. I lit candles. I hung the silver balloons. I even put a playlist on my Bluetooth speaker, soft jazz, the kind my mother used to play in the kitchen when I was small, back when the kitchen still felt like a safe place. By 6:30, the house smelled incredible. The table looked like something from a magazine if the magazine was for people who had more hope than sense. At 7, I sat down. At 7:05, I checked my phone. Nothing. At 7:15, I texted, "Hey, dinner's ready whenever you guys get here." No reply. 7:30. My knee started bouncing under the table. The candles had burned down a 1/4 inch. The chicken was cooling. I adjusted the tulips twice. 7:45. I called my mother. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called my father. Same. I called Kevin. He picked up on the 3rd ring. I heard background noise noise. A bar, maybe. Music. Laughter. Hey, Maddie, what's up? Dinner? At my house? Tonight? A pause. The kind of pause that tells you everything before the words do. Oh, yeah, I think Mom said something came up. I figured it was pushed. Who pushed it? I didn't push it. I don't know. Look, I'm out with some people right now. Can we do it another time? He hung up before I could answer. I sat at that table for another 30 minutes. I don't know why. Maybe I was waiting for the miracle. Maybe I was letting the last thread of something, hope probably, unspool completely so I could see exactly how long it was, exactly how thin. At 8:15, my mother's text arrived. Sorry, something came up, busy tonight. I read it 3 times. Then I stood up, blew out the candles, and started cleaning. I cleaned the way I do everything, thoroughly, systematically, without stopping. I wrapped the chicken in foil. I poured the mashed potatoes into a container. I washed every dish by hand because the dishwasher hadn't been connected yet. I swept the floor. I pulled down the balloons one by one, and the soft hiss of escaping helium sounded like the house exhaling. I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I've seen people describe moments like this and they always say they cried. I didn't. My body did something else, something flatter. My hands went numb at the fingertips. My chest felt hollow, like someone had reached in and scooped out the center. Not dramatic, just empty. I've since learned there's a clinical term for it. Dr. Renee Hollis, a licensed therapist I started seeing 2 months later, 12 years of practice, specializing in family systems and adult children of emotionally neglectful parents, called it affective shutdown. She said it's what happens when the emotional system has been overloaded so many times that it stops registering new injuries in real time. Your body knew before your mind did, she told me. It had already started protecting you. At 11:48, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Amber, Kevin's girlfriend of about 6 months, standing on my porch holding a grocery store sheet cake in a plastic shell. The frosting said, "Congrats," in blue letters that were already smudging. Hey, she said. I thought someone should bring something. I let her in because I didn't have the energy to not let her in. We sat in the living room. She ate a piece of cake. I didn't. She told me the house was really cute and asked about the neighborhood. I gave short answers. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my throat for hours. What came up? What was so important? Amber looked at her cake. She pressed a crumb flat with her fork. I don't think anything came up, Madison. Silence. Kevin was at Darcy's watching the game. Your mom posted on Facebook around 6. She was at some craft fair in Brevard. I don't know about your dad. So there it was. Not emergencies. Not conflicts. Not something came up. Just not caring enough. My brother was watching a game. My mother was at a craft fair. My father, who never responded to the original message, was wherever fathers go when they've decided their daughter's life isn't worth the drive. Amber left around midnight. I locked the door, walked upstairs to my bedroom, the room I'd imagined sleeping in for years, and lay on the bare mattress because my sheets were still in a box somewhere. The ceiling was white, perfect, untouched. I stared at it until 3 a.m., and somewhere in those hours, something inside me shifted. Not cracked, shifted. Like a bone that had been slightly out of alignment for 30 years and finally, audibly, clicked into place. At 6:14 the next morning, my father texted me. We need to talk about the house. Not, sorry we missed dinner. Not, congratulations. Not, I'm proud of you. We need to talk about the house. My stomach dropped, not because I was scared. Because I already knew, the way you know a storm is coming before the sky changes, that whatever he wanted to talk about wasn't going to be about celebrating what I'd built. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I made coffee in my new kitchen, sat on my porch swing, and watched the oak tree catch the morning light. I breathed. I let the silence do what silence does when you finally stop filling it with other people's noise. Then I called my father back. What he said, calmly, in that measured, neutral tone he'd perfected over decades of staying technically uninvolved, was this. Your mother and I have been talking. We think it's a bit much what you did. Buying a house without discussing it with the family. Kevin's been struggling, and seeing you post something like that, it's not sensitive, Madison. We think you should be more mindful of how your choices affect other people. I held the phone away from my ear for a moment. I looked at the oak tree. I looked at my house that I had earned with a decade of work that none of them had ever acknowledged. So, I said slowly, you didn't come to dinner because you think I shouldn't have bought a house. That's not what I said. And the reason you're calling me the morning after is not to apologize for not showing up, but to tell me I should feel bad about succeeding because Kevin hasn't. Madison, don't twist. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. When I sent that photo of me on the porch, holding the key, did you feel happy for me, even for a second? The silence lasted 4 seconds. I counted. That's not the point, he said. That was my answer. I want to say I handled what came next with grace and maturity. That would be a lie. What I did was go to the hardware store, buy a piece of cedar board and a wood-burning kit, and spend an hour carefully burning the following words. No family discounts. No family visits. No exceptions. I hung it on my front gate. I took a photograph, and I posted it to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter with the caption, "My house, my rules." Was it petty? Probably. Was it dramatic? Absolutely. Was it the most honest thing I'd ever done in 30 years? Without question. The post went up at 11:30 a.m. on a Sunday. By 6 p.m., it had 4,200 shares. The internet is a strange place. Strangers will sometimes understand you more clearly than the people who raised you. The comments were overwhelming, not in volume, though there were thousands, but in specificity. People wrote paragraphs. They shared their own stories. The graduations no one one attended, the promotions no one acknowledged, the houses and businesses and degrees that were met with silence or resentment by the people who were supposed to celebrate them. One comment from a woman named Teresa in Michigan said, "I bought my first house at 34, and my sister told me I was showing off. It took me 5 more years to understand that her discomfort with my success was not my responsibility." That sentence hit me like a truck at 40 miles per hour. I read it 6 times. Meanwhile, my phone was ringing. My mother called 4 times between noon and 3 p.m. I didn't pick up. Kevin texted, "What the hell, Maddie? Take that post down." Then 20 minutes later, "Mom is crying. Are you happy now?" My father called once at 4:17 p.m. I let it ring. He left a voicemail that I saved and later gave to Dr. Hollis, in which he said, his voice tight with controlled anger, "You are embarrassing this family. This is not how we raised you. If you don't take that down by tonight, your mother and I will have to reconsider our relationship with you." Reconsider our relationship, as if they'd ever had one with me in the first place, as if showing up to a dinner, a graduation, a life was something they'd been doing all along, and I was the one rocking the boat. I saved the voicemail. I didn't take the post down. Monday morning, my phone rang at 7:02, a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. "Ms. Carter, my name is Janet Boyle. I'm a reporter with the Asheville Citizen-Times. I saw your post. It's trending locally. Would you be willing to talk about it?" Janet Boyle, 11 years in local journalism, Pulitzer nomination in 2019 for a series on Appalachian housing inequality. She wasn't sensational, she was thorough. I said yes. Janet came to the house that Tuesday. She sat on my porch swing, drank coffee from a mug I'd bought at the dollar store, and listened for 90 minutes while I told her everything. Not just the dinner, the decade, the savings, the sacrifice, the family that treated my ambition like an inconvenience and my success like an insult. She asked for documentation. I gave her everything. Bank statements showing a decade of consistent deposits, the closing documents from Diane Prescott's office, pay stubs from my IT jobs, the screenshots of the family group chat, my invitation, their non-responses, the texts afterward, my father's voicemail, Kevin's messages, all of it. Janet's article ran the following Thursday. The headline, "She saved for a decade, bought her dream home, and her family didn't show up. Then the internet did." It went viral within 12 hours. Here's where things escalated beyond anything I could have predicted. After the article, I started getting messages, not from strangers this time, but from people in my family's orbit. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, old family friends, people who had watched the dynamics play out for decades and never said anything. My cousin Rachel, my father's brother's daughter, someone I'd been close to as a child before the families drifted apart, sent me a long email. I read it sitting at my kitchen table at 10 p.m. on a Friday night, and by the time I finished, my hands were trembling. Rachel told me things I'd never known. She told me that my parents had taken out a $15,000 loan to help Kevin with a down payment on a condo 3 years earlier, a condo he'd defaulted on within 18 months. She told me that my mother had organized a surprise party for Kevin's 30th birthday at a restaurant that cost $2,200, paid for by my parents. She told me that when I'd graduated from college, my parents had told extended family that I'd finally finished, as though it had taken me longer than expected, when in fact I'd graduated on time with a 3.7 GPA while working 25 hours a week. But the part that made my chest tighten, the part I had to read standing up because sitting felt like drowning, was this. "Your mom told my mom about 2 years ago that she was worried about you. She said you were obsessed with this house idea and that it was unhealthy. She said she hoped you wouldn't actually buy one because it would make Kevin feel worse about himself. Madison, she literally hoped you would fail so Kevin wouldn't feel bad." I put my phone down. I walked to the bathroom. I ran cold water over my wrists, a trick Dr. Hollis had taught me for when anxiety turns physical. I stood there for 5 minutes, breathing, letting the water run, letting the truth settle into the exact shape it had always been, but I'd been too loyal to see. My mother hadn't missed my dinner because she was busy. She'd missed it because she resented the reason for it. I forwarded Rachel's email to Dr. Hollis. We had an emergency session that Monday. Video call 7:30 a.m. before my work shift. Dr. Hollis didn't seem surprised. She rarely did. That was one of the things I appreciated about her. She treated revelations not as shocks, but as puzzle pieces clicking into existing patterns. "Madison, what you're describing is a well-documented family dynamic," she said. "In family systems theory, we call it the identified patient model, but in your case, it's inverted. You're not the family member who's struggling and being scapegoated for it. You're the family member who's succeeding, and the family system can't accommodate that because it threatens the existing hierarchy." She paused. "Your brother Kevin is what we'd call the golden child, not because he's successful, but because his dependency serves your parents' need to be needed. Your success doesn't just challenge Kevin, it challenges their entire identity as parents. If you can thrive without them, what does that say about the help they gave Kevin?" I thought about that for a long time. "It says the help didn't help," I said. "It says the help was never about Kevin at all," she said. The crisis peak came on a Wednesday, 6 weeks after the dinner. I was at work. I'd been promoted to a senior systems administrator role by then, $74,000 a year, full benefits, when I got a call from a number I recognized. It was Thomas Dunlap, the real estate attorney who'd handled my closing. 15 years in real estate law, partner at Dunlap and Faraday. "Madison, I need to ask you something wrong, and I don't want you to panic. My stomach hit the floor. Has anyone in your family recently made inquiries about your property deed? What? I got a call this morning from an attorney in Raleigh named Craig Beller. He's representing your parents. He wanted to know if there were any irregularities in your closing, specifically whether any family funds were used in the down payment that might create a claim of equitable interest. I couldn't speak for a moment. The office fluorescent lights felt too bright. My coworker in the next cubicle was eating chips. The normalcy of everything around me felt violent against what I was hearing. Thomas, my parents didn't give me a single dollar. Not for the house, not for college, not for anything. I know, your file is clean. I told Mr. Beller that, and I told him any further inquiries would need to come through formal channels. But Madison, they're fishing. And the fact that they hired an attorney to fish means this isn't casual. I hung up. I sat at my desk for 14 minutes without moving. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up every bank statement I had going back to 2013, and began organizing them chronologically in a shared drive. At 5:15 p.m., I drove directly to Thomas Dunlap's office. He stayed late. We spent 2 hours going through my financial history, line by line, every deposit, every transfer, every paycheck. This is ironclad, Thomas said. There is zero ambiguity. This house was purchased entirely with your own documented income. If they try to file a claim, they'll lose, and they'll likely face sanctions for a frivolous filing. Why would they do this? I asked, even though I already knew. Thomas looked at me over his reading glasses. In my experience, because they can't stand that it's yours. I retained Thomas formally the next day. He sent a cease and desist letter to Craig Beller, certified mail, dated and filed, stating that any claim to my property was baseless and that further action would be met with a counterclaim for harassment and abuse of process. But I didn't stop there. I called Janet Boyle. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a long time, then said, Madison, are you willing to go on record? Yes. All of it? The legal threat, the family emails, the financial records? Every word. Janet's follow-up article ran 2 weeks later. It included quotes from Thomas Dunlap. It included a statement from Craig Beller's office saying his clients had no further comment at this time. It included Rachel's account, given with her consent. It included a timeline of my savings history, verified against tax records I'd voluntarily provided. The headline, Family of Dream Home Buyer Attempted Legal Claim on Property She Earned Alone. That article didn't just go viral, it detonated. The consequences came fast. Craig Beller dropped my parents as clients within a week. According to Thomas, Beller cited reputational concerns, which is lawyer speak for, I don't want my name attached to this dumpster fire. My mother's craft fair business, she sold handmade candles online and at local markets, lost its entire following within days. Her Etsy reviews were flooded. She had to shut down the shop. I didn't orchestrate that, and I didn't celebrate it, but I didn't mourn it either. Kevin called me, the first time he'd called, not texted, since the night of the dinner. He was drunk. It was 1:30 a.m. His voice was thick, wavering between anger and something that might have been shame if he'd known what to do with it. You ruined everything, Madison. You know that, right? Mom won't stop crying. Dad's not talking to anyone. You blew up this family over a dinner. No, Kevin, I said. I blew up a family that hoped I would fail. He was quiet for a long time. That's not true, he said, but his voice broke on the last word, and we both knew he didn't believe it. I hung up. I turned my phone off. I went to bed. The next morning, I blocked all 3 of their numbers. Not out of anger, out of peace. There's a difference. My father sent a letter 3 weeks later. An actual paper letter, handwritten, mailed to my house, the house he'd never visited. Thomas Dunlap reviewed it first, as I'd asked him to review any family communications during the legal dispute. Thomas called me. It's not a legal document, it's personal. Do you want to read it? I did. My father's handwriting was small and careful, the way it always was. The letter was 2 pages. It said in various ways that he was sorry, that he hadn't understood how his silence had felt, that my mother's behavior was not something he agreed with, but that he'd failed to intervene, that he was proud of me, that he always had been. I read it twice. I put it in a drawer. Dr. Hollis asked me how I felt about it. I believe he's sorry, I said. But being sorry and changing are different things, and I've spent 30 years waiting for change that never comes. What do you want to do? Nothing. For now, I want to do nothing and see how that feels. It felt like freedom. The months that followed were the quietest and fullest of my life. I didn't reconcile with my family. I didn't shut the door permanently either. I just stopped performing, stopped reaching, stopped setting tables for people who wouldn't come. And in the space that opened up, other people arrived. My neighbor, Dale, a retired electrician, 72 years old, showed up on my porch one Saturday morning with a pecan pie and said, I read about you in the paper. My daughter went through something similar. Welcome to the street. A woman from my office named Priya started coming over for weekend coffee. Then her husband, then their kids, then another neighbor. Then a woman from my running group who'd just gone through a divorce and needed somewhere to sit that wasn't her empty apartment. The kids on the block started coming by after school. I don't know how it started. I think one of them saw me setting up my laptop on the porch and asked what I was doing. I said coding. They asked if I could teach them. I said sure. Within a month, I had 4 kids sitting on my porch every Tuesday and Thursday, learning basic Python on borrowed Chromebooks. I taught them loops, variables, simple games. One of them, a 12-year-old named Marcus, who reminded me so much of myself it hurt, built a functioning calculator in 3 weeks. He showed his mom. She cried. She brought me tamales. I cried. That's the thing nobody tells you about building a life for yourself. It doesn't stay empty. If you build it with honesty, the right people find their way in. Not because you begged them, not because you set a perfect table and held your breath. They come because the door is open and the light is on and you're not performing. You're just there. 7 months after the dinner that no one came to, I hosted another one. Same table, same candles, different flowers. Sunflowers this time, because Dale told me they lasted longer. The roast chicken recipe improved. A new playlist, still jazz, but I'd added some Afrobeat because Priya's husband said it was better cooking music, and he was right. 8 people came. Dale, Priya, and Raj. Marcus and his mom, Elena. 2 women from my running group. A quiet guy named James from the neighborhood who'd fixed my mailbox without being asked and whom I'd invited on impulse. We ate. We talked. We laughed so loudly that Dale's hearing aid whistled and he pretended to be offended. Marcus tried the lemon tart and declared it bussin', which I'm told is the highest compliment a 12-year-old can give. At 10 p.m., everyone was still there. Nobody was checking the time. Nobody was making excuses. The house was warm, not from the oven, not from the candles, but from the specific, irreplaceable warmth that comes from people who actually want to be where they are. I stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, holding a dish towel, watching the table, and I thought about that first Saturday night, the cold chicken, the sagging balloons, the silence that felt like a verdict. And I understood something I couldn't have understood then. The house was never a test. It wasn't something my family needed to pass. It wasn't proof of my worth or a measure of their love. It was just a house, a building, 4 walls and a roof and a 70-year-old oak tree. What made it matter wasn't the key. It was the people inside it and the painful, necessary process of learning which people deserved to be there. The first night, my house held absence. This night, it held belonging. I accidentally discovered my husband's divorce strategy email. 7 days later, his $400 million empire was gone. The subject line read, Divorce Strategy, Phase 2. I was standing in my kitchen at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning, holding a cup of green tea that was still too hot to drink, wearing an oversized Stanford sweatshirt and no makeup, looking at my husband's laptop screen. I hadn't been snooping. I hadn't been suspicious. I just needed to check a shipping confirmation for a set of ceramic planters I'd ordered for the patio, and Thomas had left his MacBook open on the kitchen island before leaving for his 6:30 a.m. workout. I opened Safari. His email was already loaded, and there it was, not buried in some hidden folder, not tucked behind 2-factor authentication, just sitting in his inbox like a gas bill, sandwiched between a newsletter from his golf club and a LinkedIn notification. From Richard Kavanaugh, Escaber, Kavanaugh and Pratt Family Law, to Thomas Whitfield. Subject, Divorce Strategy. Phase 2. I told myself not to click it. I clicked it. The first line I read was, per our discussion, the key is ensuring she doesn't see it coming. My fingers went numb. The mug slipped slightly in my hand. I caught it before it fell, set it down on the granite countertop, and watched a small splash of tea pool on the stone like a green ink blot. My vision narrowed to a tunnel. The kitchen around me, the white subway tile, the copper pendant lights, the fresh roses Thomas had brought home on Sunday, blurred into nothing. I scrolled down, and I read every word. I need to back up, because if I don't tell you who I was before that Tuesday morning, none of what happened next will make sense. My name is Lynn. Most people know me as Linda Whitfield, the quiet, pleasant wife of Thomas Whitfield, founder and CEO of Whitfield Capital Partners, a mid-market private equity firm with offices in Manhattan, Miami, and London. Thomas was the public face, the magazine interviews, the charity galas, the firm handshake at industry conferences. He was 6'1", silver at the temples, always tanned, always wearing a $4,000 watch and a smile calibrated to inspire trust. People assumed I was the trophy, the soft-spoken Vietnamese-American wife who smiled graciously at fundraisers and let her husband do the talking, the woman who married well. Here's what people didn't know. Before I met Thomas, I built a company called Verdana Health Systems from a single urgent care clinic in San Jose into a network of 47 facilities across 3 states. I started it at 26 with $180,000 in savings, a small SBA loan, and a business plan I wrote on a folding table in my studio apartment. By 34, Verdana was generating $62 million in annual revenue. By 38, when a national hospital group acquired a majority stake, the deal valued the company at $400 million, and I retained controlling interest in the holding entity. $400 million, built from nothing, built by me. I didn't advertise it, I didn't post about it, I kept my ownership structures clean, my name out of press releases, and my ego in check. I'd watched too many founders get destroyed by visibility. Lawsuits, stalkers, estranged relatives crawling out of the woodwork with their hands out. So I stayed quiet. I let Thomas be the loud one. When we married, I was 40 and he was 43. We'd been dating for 2 years. He was attentive, funny, and seemed genuinely unbothered by the fact that I was wealthier than he was. He never asked me to fund his projects. He never pressured me to merge our finances completely. He did suggest we open a joint account for household expenses, which we did. And over time, we bought 2 properties together, opened a shared brokerage account, and co-signed on a vacation home in Montauk. But the core of my wealth, the Verdana Holding Company, the offshore trusts my accountant had structured years before the marriage, the private investment accounts, stayed in my name. Not because I didn't trust Thomas, because I'd learned long before I met him that protecting what you've built is not suspicion, it's wisdom. I told myself that distinction would never matter. I was wrong. The emails went back 6 weeks. I stood in the kitchen and read them all, scrolling with a finger that had stopped trembling and gone completely still. The tea grew cold. The morning light shifted across the counter. I didn't move. Thomas had retained Richard Kavanaugh, a divorce attorney whose firm website I would later look up, finding the tagline, "Strategic Advocacy for High Net Worth Individuals," sometime in early February. The email chain was meticulous, organized, and devastatingly thorough. In the first exchange, dated February 4th, Thomas had laid out his concerns. He described me as emotionally volatile, financially controlling, and prone to erratic decision-making. He claimed I had systematically excluded him from major financial decisions, and that he feared I would attempt to hide assets if he filed for divorce. Every single word was a lie. I kept reading. In a follow-up dated February 11th, Kavanaugh outlined the strategy. Thomas would file first. The initiating party controls the narrative, Kavanaugh wrote. He would request an emergency motion to freeze my accounts, citing concerns about asset dissipation. He would claim that certain Verdana holdings were marital property because Thomas had provided strategic counsel during the marriage. He would petition for temporary spousal support based on the argument that his lifestyle was financially dependent on marital assets. There was a line in that email that I will remember until the day I die. Kavanaugh had written, "Given her cultural background, the court may view her financial secrecy as consistent with a pattern of concealment rather than legitimate asset protection. My cultural background." He was going to weaponize the fact that I'm Vietnamese. I set the laptop down, I walked to the kitchen sink, I turned on the cold water and held both hands under the stream until my fingers ached. I counted to 60. Then I dried my hands on a dish towel, walked back to the laptop, and took screenshots of every single email in the thread, 43 messages in total. I airdropped them to my personal phone, then forwarded them to an email address I hadn't used in years, an emergency-only Gmail account I'd created during a corporate dispute in 2019. Then I closed the laptop, placed it back exactly where Thomas had left it, angled slightly to the left with the charger draped over the edge of the counter, and poured my cold tea down the sink. Thomas came home from the gym at 8:15. He kissed me on the cheek. He smelled like eucalyptus and clean sweat. "Morning, babe," he said, grabbing a protein shake from the fridge. "Sleep okay?" "Like a rock," I said. I smiled at him. It was the last honest smile I would ever give that man, because it was honestly the smile of someone who had just decided, with absolute clarity, to dismantle his entire plan before he even knew the game had changed. That night, after Thomas fell asleep at 10:40, I know the time because I watched the clock on the nightstand until his breathing leveled out. I got out of bed, took my personal laptop to the guest bathroom, locked the door, and created a new folder on an encrypted drive. I named it Freedom. Inside, I saved every screenshot, organized by date. Then I opened a blank document and started writing. Not a journal, a timeline. Every financial decision Thomas and I had made during our marriage. Every account opened, every property purchased, every dollar moved. I cross-referenced it against the strategy Kavanaugh had outlined in the emails. I identified every asset Thomas was planning to claim as marital property, and I noted, with clinical precision, the evidence proving each one belonged solely to me. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I didn't fantasize about confrontation. I just worked. At 1:30 a.m., I texted 3 people from a prepaid phone I'd purchased 18 months ago during a separate business matter and kept in a locked drawer in my home office. The first was my accountant, David Park, CPA, 14 years of experience with high net worth individuals, former senior auditor at Deloitte. David had managed Verdana's books since the early days. He knew every entity, every trust, every holding structure I'd ever created. I trusted him more than anyone alive. The second was my corporate attorney, Margaret Okafor, JD from Georgetown, partner at Liang and Okafor LLP, specializing in asset protection, corporate restructuring, and cross-border transactions. Margaret was the one who'd structured my premarital trusts. She was brilliant, discreet, and fundamentally incapable of being intimidated. The third was my oldest friend, Catherine Zhao. Catherine wasn't a lawyer or an accountant. She was a forensic financial analyst, 15 years at the SEC before going private. She specialized in tracing hidden assets, shell companies, and fraudulent transfers. She was the person you called when someone was trying to hide money. I sent the same message to all 3. I need to meet. Not at the house, not on regular phones, tomorrow. All 3 replied within 20 minutes. We met the next afternoon at a private office space Catherine maintained in a building on West 57th Street. No signage, no reception desk, just a plain gray door with a keypad lock. I told Thomas I was going to a spa appointment. I kissed him on the cheek, got into a black car, and didn't look back. The meeting lasted 4 hours. I showed them the emails. David read them with his lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Margaret read them with her arms crossed and her jaw tight. Catherine read them twice, the second time with a yellow legal pad, making notes in handwriting so small it looked like code. "He's not just planning a divorce," Margaret said when she finished. "He's planning a financial ambush. Filing first, freezing your accounts, claiming your premarital assets as marital property. This Kavanaugh knows exactly what he's doing. It's a standard high net worth offensive filing playbook." "The cultural background line," David said quietly. "That's a dog whistle for the judge. He's going to try to frame your normal asset protection as something sinister." "It's worse than that," Catherine said. She tapped her legal pad. "He's been making moves already. Look at the email from March 3rd. He mentions repositioning personal investments. That means he's already started hiding money. If I had to guess, I'd say he's opened accounts you don't know about, possibly offshore. He's doing exactly what he's accusing you of planning to do." She looked at me. "I need access to everything. Every account, every statement, every login. Can you get that?" I could. Over the next 72 hours, while Thomas attended board meetings and played racquetball at his club and texted his divorce attorney from the bathroom of our apartment, thinking I was completely oblivious, I quietly, methodically collected every financial document in our home. Thomas was careless, staggeringly, almost insultingly careless. He kept a leather-bound notebook in his home office desk, top drawer, unlocked, that contained passwords for 14 different accounts, written in his neat, blocky handwriting. He reused the same base password with minor variations, Whitfield, followed by a number and a symbol. I accessed his brokerage accounts, his private banking portal, his email, a secondary account I hadn't known about, and a file-sharing platform where he'd stored documents related to 3 companies I'd never heard of. I photographed everything. I uploaded copies to the encrypted drive. I worked between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. while he slept, sitting cross-legged on the guest bathroom floor with my laptop balanced on the edge of the bathtub and the door locked, the exhaust fan running to mask the faint glow of the screen. On the 3rd night, Catherine called me from her private line. "Lynn," she said. Her voice was flat, the tone she used when delivering bad news. "I found 3 accounts in the Cayman Islands, opened 8 months ago. Total deposits, $1.2 million. The money came from your shared brokerage account. He moved it in 4 transfers, all under $400,000, all timed to avoid triggering the reporting threshold." I closed my eyes. "There's more," Catherine continued. "One of the accounts is linked to a private investment agreement, an LLC registered in Delaware. The beneficial owner is listed as Thomas, but the operating agreement names a co-investor." She paused. "His name is Richard Kavanaugh, the divorce attorney. Thomas's divorce lawyer was his business partner. The man advising him on how to take half my money was personally invested in the outcome." I sat on the bathroom floor and pressed my palms against the cold tile. I breathed in through my nose, out through my mouth. I counted to 10. "Can you document all of it?" I asked. "Already done," Catherine said. "Exhibit ready. Day 5. By now, I'd been living a double life for almost a week. Every morning, I made Thomas coffee in his oversized mug, the one that said, "Mud One Dad," even though we didn't have children, a gift from his niece, and asked about his schedule. Every evening, I cooked dinner or ordered from the Thai place on Amsterdam Avenue, sat across from him at the dining table, and listened to him talk about market trends and client meetings while my phone, sitting silently in my purse across the room, contained enough evidence to end his financial life. The performance was exhausting. Not because it was hard to lie. It turned out I was disturbingly good at it, but because every time Thomas touched my hand, or laughed at something I said, or called me babe with that easy, practiced warmth, I felt the phantom weight of those emails pressing against my chest like a stone. "She doesn't see it coming." He'd written that about me. About the woman sitting across from him, passing him the soy sauce. On the 5th night, Thomas invited his friend Marcus over for drinks. Marcus Adler, hedge fund manager, member of Thomas's golf foursome, the kind of man who wore fleece vests over button-downs and talked about his wine collection at every opportunity. I'd never liked him. He had a way of looking at me that suggested he considered my presence in Thomas's life a minor curiosity, like an unusual piece of furniture. I told Thomas I was going to read in the bedroom. He barely registered it, just nodded, already pulling out the Macallan 18. What Thomas didn't know was that 2 days earlier, I had placed a small, voice-activated recording device behind a row of books on the shelf in the living room. It was a Sony ICD UX570, $80 on Amazon, the size of a thumb drive. I'd ordered it to a P.O. box Catherine had set up. I sat in the bedroom with wireless earbuds in, connected to a monitoring app on my phone, and listened. For the first 40 minutes, it was nothing. Golf handicaps, a stock tip Marcus claimed to have gotten from a guy at Goldman, a crude joke about their accountant's wife. I almost turned it off. Then I heard my name. "So you're really doing it?" Marcus asked. I heard the clink of ice in a glass. "Filing next month," Thomas said. His voice was relaxed, confident, the voice of a man who believed he was among friends, behind closed doors, completely safe. "Kavanaugh's got the whole thing mapped out. She won't know what hit her." "And the money?" Marcus pressed. "The Verdana stuff?" Thomas laughed. It was a sound I'd heard 1,000 times. Warm, rich, utterly charming. I'd fallen in love with that laugh. Now it made my stomach drop. "That's the beauty of it," Thomas said. "She thinks it's all protected. But Kavanaugh found angles. The joint accounts, the co-signed properties, the shared brokerage. There's enough commingling to argue that her premarital assets lost their protected status. If we file first and freeze everything, she'll be so panicked she'll settle. She's not a fighter. She's not a fighter." I removed my earbuds. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark room and pressed my hands flat against my knees. Then I picked up my prepaid phone and texted Margaret Okafor 4 words. "We move tomorrow morning, day 6. The day I became someone Thomas never knew existed. At 8 a.m., while Thomas was in the shower, I left the apartment. I told him through the bathroom door that I was meeting a friend for brunch. He said, "Have fun, babe." The water kept running. I didn't go to brunch. I went to the offices of Liang and Okafor on Park Avenue, where Margaret had assembled a team that included David Park, Catherine Zhao, and a litigation attorney named James Harrington, 26 years of matrimonial law, former president of the New York State Bar Association's family law section. James had been brought in specifically for the divorce filing. Margaret handled asset protection. David handled the numbers. Catherine handled the forensics. James handled the courtroom. The plan Margaret had built over the previous 5 days was surgical. First, asset separation. Every dollar that was legally mine, Verdana holdings, premarital trusts, personal investment accounts, was systematically disentangled from any jointly held vehicle. David had prepared transfer authorizations for 11 accounts. Margaret had drafted corporate resolutions to restructure 2 holding entities. I signed 47 documents in 90 minutes. Second, evidence preservation. Catherine had compiled a 200-page forensic report documenting Thomas's hidden accounts, the Cayman transfers, the undisclosed LLC with Kavanaugh, and the audio recording from the previous night. The report was formatted to court standards, time-stamped, indexed, cross-referenced, and copies were delivered to James's office by bonded courier. Third, the filing. At 11:45 a.m., James Harrington filed a petition for divorce in the Supreme Court of the State of New York, County of Manhattan, on my behalf. The filing included a motion for emergency relief citing financial fraud, concealment of marital assets, and breach of fiduciary duty. Attached as exhibits were the screenshots of Thomas's emails with Kavanaugh, Catherine's forensic report, the recording transcript, and David's analysis demonstrating that $2 million in marital funds had been diverted to undisclosed offshore accounts. At 12:30 p.m., Judge Helen Matsuda, 18 years on the bench, known for her zero-tolerance approach to financial misconduct in matrimonial cases, reviewed the emergency motion and signed an order freezing every account associated with Thomas Whitfield, including the 3 Cayman accounts, the Delaware LLC, and his personal brokerage. At 1:15 p.m., a separate motion was filed with the State Bar's Ethics Committee, requesting an investigation into Richard Kavanaugh for engaging in a financial relationship with a client while simultaneously providing legal representation in a matter involving those same financial interests. By 2:00 p.m., it was done. Every piece was in place. I sat in Margaret's office looking out the window at the traffic on Park Avenue 22 stories below and felt absolutely nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just the strange, hollow quiet that comes after you've been holding your breath for a very long time and finally, exhale. Margaret handed me a glass of water. "He's going to call you," she said. "I know," I replied. "Don't answer." "I won't." Thomas found out at 4:47 p.m. I know the exact time because his assistant later told my legal team that Thomas had been in a meeting with 2 clients when his personal phone started buzzing. He excused himself, stepped into the hallway, and read the notification from his bank. "Account access has been temporarily restricted pursuant to a court order." He tried to log into his brokerage. Frozen. His checking account. Frozen. The Cayman accounts. The ones he thought nobody knew about. Frozen. He called Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh didn't answer. Kavanaugh was, at that exact moment, reading a letter from the State Bar informing him that a formal ethics complaint had been filed against him, and that his financial relationship with Thomas Whitfield was now the subject of an official investigation. Thomas called me 17 times between 4:47 and 6:30. I didn't answer. At 6:12, he sent a text that read, "What the hell is going on? Call me now." At 6:35, he sent another. "Lynn, whatever you think you know, we can talk about this. Don't do anything crazy. Don't do anything crazy." The man who'd spent 6 weeks secretly plotting to take my life's work was telling me not to do anything crazy. I called him back at 7. Wow. 1 call, 3 minutes. "What are you doing?" he said. His voice was high, tight, stripped of every ounce of the smooth confidence I'd lived with for 6 years. "What you tried to do first," I said calmly. "But legally, with evidence, this won't hold up. Kavanaugh is under investigation by the State Bar," I said. "His accounts are frozen too. You might want to find a new attorney." Silence. 8 seconds of it. "Lynn, good night, Thomas." I hung up. I set the phone on the nightstand of the furnished apartment I'd rented 3 weeks earlier under a newly formed LLC. I sat on the edge of the bed, a queen size in a clean, anonymous 2-bedroom on the Upper West Side, and looked at my reflection in the dark window. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a woman scorned. I saw someone who had protected herself, waited with patience that bordered on terrifying, and struck with the precision of the businesswoman she'd always been. The proceedings took 4 months. Thomas hired a new attorney, a criminal defense lawyer this time, because the financial fraud charges were serious enough that criminal referral was on the table. His name was Stuart Benson, 20 years of white-collar defense, and even Stuart couldn't spin the evidence Catherine had compiled. The Cayman accounts were documented. The forged investment agreements were documented. The $1.2 million diverted from our shared brokerage, money that included returns from investments I had funded, was traced, time-stamped, and presented to Judge Matsuda in a hearing that lasted 3 days. Thomas took the stand. His attorney tried to paint the transfers as routine portfolio diversification. Catherine's forensic report destroyed that argument in under 10 minutes. The transfers had been structured specifically to avoid regulatory reporting thresholds, a technique known as structuring, which is, as James Harrington pointed out to the judge, a federal crime. Judge Matsuda's ruling was 14 pages long. I'll summarize the parts that mattered. Thomas was ordered to return the $2 million in diverted funds immediately. He was assessed a punitive judgment of $340,000 for concealment and breach of fiduciary duty. He was denied any claim to Verdana Holdings or my premarital assets, which the court ruled had never lost their protected status. The joint properties were divided equitably. I received the Montauk house. Thomas received the apartment, minus a lien equal to his fraud penalties. Richard Kavanaugh's law license was suspended pending a full disciplinary hearing. Last I heard, his firm quietly dissolved 4 months later. The website went dark. The phone number was disconnected. Thomas's firm, Whitfield Capital Partners, lost 3 major clients within weeks of the court filings becoming public. Financial misconduct in a matrimonial case might sound like a private matter, but when your business is managing other people's money, the word fraud in a court document tends to make investors nervous. His co-founder bought him out at a steep discount. By the end of the year, Thomas Whitfield's name had been quietly removed from the firm's letterhead, its website, and its lobby signage. He didn't go to prison. The federal referral was ultimately declined. The amounts were significant, but fell below the threshold for prosecution. He received a civil penalty and a permanent mark on his financial record that would follow him into every business deal, every bank application, every partnership negotiation for the rest of his career. It wasn't prison, but for a man whose entire identity was built on the appearance of success, trustworthiness, and control, it was something worse. It was exposure. 1 year later, I was sitting in a clinic, not an office, a clinic. One of the original Verdana urgent care facilities, the first one I'd opened 12 years ago in a strip mall in San Jose, wedged between a nail salon and a Subway. The linoleum was new, the paint was fresh, but the bones of the building were the same. I could still see the spot where the reception desk had been when I'd assembled it myself with an Allen wrench and a YouTube tutorial. I'd flown out from New York to attend the opening of a new community health initiative funded by the Verdana Foundation, a program providing free preventive care to uninsured workers in the Bay Area. 47 clinics, 12,000 patients served in the first quarter alone. I sat in a plastic chair in the waiting room after the ceremony, watching a young mother fill out intake forms while her daughter, maybe 4 years old, sat beside her swinging her legs, humming a song I didn't recognize. My phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. His new LLC filing was rejected, flagged by the state. Again, he's running out of options. I read it, then deleted it. I didn't need to follow Thomas's story anymore. That chapter was closed. The folder on my encrypted drive, the one labeled Freedom, hadn't been opened in months. I watched the little girl in the waiting room. She looked up at me and waved, unprompted, the way children do, without calculation, without agenda, without strategy. I waved back. I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, sitting on a cold bathroom floor at 2 a.m., cross-legged, laptop on the edge of the tub, documenting the betrayal of the person she'd trusted most. I thought about the morning I'd found those emails, the green tea, the shipping confirmation I never checked, the subject line that rearranged my entire life in the space of a heartbeat. I thought about Thomas, not with anger. The anger had burned clean months ago, consumed entirely by its own fuel, leaving behind nothing but ash and clarity. I thought about him the way you think about a lesson that cost more than it should have, with a grim, quiet respect for the education it provided. He had called me obedient. He had called me predictable. He had told his friend over whiskey in our living room that I wasn't a fighter. I took a breath. I looked around the clinic I'd built with my own hands in a strip mall with an Allen wrench. I looked at the 46 others just like it, scattered across 3 states, serving people who had nowhere else to go. He said I wasn't a fighter. He was right about one thing. I didn't fight. I won.